야, 나 마주 남지 타다니 미심제 탐지게 된도 돕잘라나메 봐 양다바 조베 산지게 공부를 무지 진행자 도바르자 디치도 담비 취해서 무슨 년비 굴롱 근주게 림바나 레바 세답데 셈바슈 다 강셈바 집에 담비 취해디 다 라창조 람비 치면 낭제 사동심 몇 갑기더니 닌다디 랑주기 다 다랑기 되시 바세 가도라 랑주기 딘시 고술이 취비다 슝디니마 죄 하데오디 무트니마 슈기스
So everyone begin by making a very clear motivation for listening to this holy Dharma teaching by holding in your mind strongly the motivation to do whatever it takes in order to achieve the perfect and highest state of supreme Buddhahood, complete perfect Buddhahood, in order to be of benefit to all sentient living beings, mother beings who are as infinite as the extent of space. And the text or the Holy Dharma teaching that we're discussing today is the Great Treatise for the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. And within that, there is a whole section called the Great Insight, which is the bulk of the third volume. And within this Great Insight, there's the topic of the distinction between the prasangika and the autonomy or the Svatantrika Madhyamika schools. And then within that, we're looking at the meaning of, we're looking at the refutation of the autonomous syllogisms and the meaning of the autonomy school.
야, 다 도시니 오나 지진이 바데스 링덴지게 따라 디니게 따바 체바테 켈랑로 지다리 인념나스 셰바차데스 다디니마 디니마 다 송여데 가서나 딱 된다디 로베 빠넨다와 잡아기 로베 린데제라 아니 된다디 가리레 랑주 딘지 미데바들 다 로베 린데지게 되지 랑주게 딘지들라 아니 최진 심마주비 교회고 마세 딘지 심마주비 교회 요래 세더라 딘지 심마주비 교회들라 덴바니게 딱바치니까 여러와 어디 가야들라 다 가리레 다 디가 와디 로벨린데 지기 다 디니게 딱바치니까 바디 다 켈랑나 다 켈랑 켈랭고 차고 다 켈랑나 송아레 디 송야들라 다 가리레스나 로벨린데 지 코랑기 아니 마 지라마와라더니 덴바니게 딱바치니 아니 마 가야죠와 어디 릭바디 추 디니 군전 충미고네 코랑라 파도와 있나 군전 충고여서 아니 켈랑고 지기레 세 오다 덴바니게 딱바치던디 가진 가지기 아니 군접도 유여바다 된남도 유여바 디닐라게 제시하고 왔다디 미지바데 가서 약간이 다 원은 다 제름지기 다 된다 디니마 다 제시자야디 다 여기 가지기 공도 미숭바디 밑에와 있나 다 제름제랑나 간제인 나와 있나 아니 제름지기 다 디니마 도스니 가리레 데만이게 딱바치 장디 디니마 제시자면 도스
So here we're in the English, again, it's the third volume, and this particular printing or edition, we are on page 265, and the last or the third paragraph. Well then, how can Chandrakirti claim that Bhavaviveka accepts the points we have just made through the use of the two truths to analyze the reason given by the essentialist? I shall explain. So here, Chandrakirti is saying towards Bhavaviveka that these things that he accepts, the autonomous syllogisms, right, are not only is there an issue that the subject is not established in the autonomous syllogism, but also the reason is not established. So that's the sort of ongoing discussion in this current section that we have been going through. Okay, so then the way that Chandrakirti is showing this, that the reason is not established, is by reference to Bhavaviveka's own analysis the two truths, where Chandakirti is now saying, so even though Bhava Viveka, you don't explicitly accept this point I'm making, implicitly you come to have to accept it. Well, how? Because you yourself, or Bhava Viveka himself, he also gives a refutation of the Vaibhashika, the great exposition proponents, in the reason that was a few pages earlier. If you can go look that up again if you need to. And where and then Bhavaveka gives this analysis of the two truths. And so in reference to the reason posited by the Vaibhashikas. So then Chandakirti was pointing out that in this where we're picking up with it in this paragraph, it's not that Bhavaveka is finding a flaw in the reason given by the Vaibhashikas by saying by analyzing the reason as to say, oh, is it a conventionally positive reason or an ultimately positive reason, or is the Buddha conventionally saying this or ultimately saying this? Is it conventionally existent or ultimately existent? So that's not the way that that's not the correct interpretation. The most logical way to interpret what Bhava Viveka is saying. So now Tsongkhapa is going to clarify what it is that Bhava Viveka did say in that reason and how Chandakirti responds to it.
Oh yeah. There lobengi machubi sheba nyeba te tunam dangche. Chubi shebe nyeba te kunzo yimba la gongnes. Tini kanyin sheba des. Tini kanyin nyeba yin sheba da nechudu jogobe samba des da. Tinda temba nyingi takpa chenyun deru wata. Kazin kachigi tunamdu yunan digimari kunzubdu yunan yubasina digimari tunam dang kunzubdu yumeki kechi sheba wata. Tila wayina temba nyingi takpa de jogo mares. Kazina kundu도 여바디 아니 진다디 가지래 두다 응어마외장 아니 가지 소소 군수비시는 군수도 여바 계는 거 알아 이나 군수도 여바 이네 저랑 남아 줄 수사 요 말이 가서는 군수도 여바스 탄녀도 여바 디 탄녀도 여바스디 로 군수비더니 아니 로 군수 받더니 탄녀비 취자지기 체명을 유명을 지고 군수도 여바스 다 근데 대만이게 따바체 세게 대만이 다 된다 대승도 로변기 스나파 로변 반년 다와 차바기 아니 가스나 덴반이게 따바치단디 마주비 시비 녀든 양다바 통위 녀든 어디디 두는 덴바스 티치 아니 추비 시비 녀바 추비 시바디 탄녀 주비 세마르와 추비 시바스디 가스나 마리 바자길 리비 시비 아니 녀비 된 샤완상 추비 시바스와 어다 딘다와들 군조 덴비샤니 다 군조 덴바당 된담 덴바니기 냠샤게 신인도 아니 가리래 마주비 시비 녀된데라 되는 데바 제와당 주비 시비 녀된데라 군주 데바 제베 디니 간이 있으니 어디 디치고레스 다 디니 간이 있어 다 디니기 관계 녀바 있는 세디 로 주바 디로와 마주비 시비 녀된레 주비 시비 녀된레 라야당 아니 되는 데바당 군주 데바 관계 원도신이라고 세니 찍바 지장레스 네 찍바 이마디 가스는 다 안다 마주비 시비 녀된 라이드 다 탈도 주직이 있으면 년되고 때 돈은 데모마도 조사요 맞들라 그와 다나시 추비 12년된 라디 아니 가서는 말이 바자길리 시바 탄입이 12년된 레인도 구조 데모마도 조사요 말이 인도선이 다 덴반이기 딱바치디 다 틴데지가 온도진이 딱바치고 그랬습니다 빠낸다와 잡아기다 바 로벨 니제라다 디니게 딱바치니 아니 바게 다 란주기 딘시 가야기 땡시 마주비 견제해디 보다 덴반이게 딱바 지에세 덴반이디 추비 12년등기 아니 군sob다 마주비 12년등기 된담 어디니 온도 지내더니 딱바 제와당 추비 12년등에 마주비 12년등에서니 깨제 제직바 지장레스 보다 딘데지 온도 지내다 가래 빠낸다와 잡아기 로벨 내제라 아니 마 데니게 딱바치 공바디 디레 스타지름지 디송도스
So continuing in the paragraph here. Here, Chandakirti is of the opinion that what is found by a non-mistaken consciousness is the ultimate, and what is found by a mistaken consciousness is the conventional. This being the case, the question, which of the two truths is it, is conceived of as a question regarding which of the two consciousnesses it is that finds the reason. It has to be one of these two options. So here, the thing being done is there's this analysis of the two truths, and the other scholars that were cited that Tsongkhapa refuted, other Tibetan interpreters of Chandakirti, right? They were saying, oh, the flaw that Chandakirti is pointing out in Bhagavad is by, I'm sorry, that both the flaw that Bhagavad points out to the essentialists, Vibhashikas, and that now Chandakirti is referencing in his refutation of Bhagavad is in relation to the question, right? The flaw comes from the question, is this ultimately existent or conventionally existent? So Tsongkhapa is saying that's not the correct interpretation. The question that Bhava Vega and likewise Chandakirti are using in their analysis of the two truths is not, is the reason ultimately existent or conventionally existent? That's not the question posed by Bhava Vega there. Instead, and that's, because just saying, conventionally existent means something that exists, right, in the perspective of a conventional mind, something that exists in the perspective of a conventional mind. So there's no way that wouldn't be established for the essentialist. That would also be established for the essentialist. So that isn't going to work as the interpretation of this point that is coming up here. So then, Chandrakirti himself, how is he intending this to be meant, to be understood, this analysis of the two truths? Well, in his refutation here, he's holding the view that ultimate truth is an object found or discovered by a non-mistaken consciousness. Conventional truth is an object found by a mistaken consciousness. So it's in relation to the mistaken and non-mistaken consciousnesses. So a mistaken consciousness here can be also called a conventional consciousness. It's a consciousness that is sort of tainted by the imprints of ignorance. And then the question then becomes, which of the two truths is it? Which is equivalent to asking, is it an object found by a non-mistaken consciousness or by a mistaken consciousness? Okay, so those come to mean the same for Chandakirti. It's an ultimate is asking, is it an ultimate truth or a conventional truth? Is the same as asking, is it an object found by a non-mistaken consciousness or an object found by a mistaken consciousness? And again, saying a non-mistaken consciousness here has to be what is the non-mistaken consciousness? The only one would be this reasoned consciousness that is analyzing the final ultimate, the ultimate, yeah. The reasoning consciousness analyzing the ultimate. And then what is a mistaken consciousness? Again, these conventional consciousness. Okay, so then this is the flaw that is being described, that this asking which of the two truths, this is how Chandrakirti is saying, what is Bhava doing in his refutation of the Vaibhashikas? He's asking which of the two truths is your reason in reference to? Which comes to mean, is it in reference to an object found by a non-mistaken consciousness or an object found by a mistaken consciousness? So Tsongkhapa is explaining this is the meaning of Chandrakirti's refutation.
Yeah. 디더러 다수급의 퇴인데 군수당 퇴인담 바 강양 마임나 다디 마주바 교르고바 당스 다수급의 퇴인데 마주바다 추비 시바니 강롱이 니비 퇴 마이나 다수급의 퇴인데 마주바 교와 군생 총발라 디 랑기 켈랑시 송바 인기 무수 켈랑바니 미누스다 담 진다 땡징 마주비 와 다음 땡징 마주비 교여바데 로벨인 된적이 계란라 송세 계란 송당디 와 계란도 무슨 계래요 말이시네 계란랑 조던 되거스나 균전 충비 고념 고네다 리비 표점 지고래 그래서는 다 루벨인데 지기 아니 마게 제라마와라 아니 깨바치비 규유도 대다 깨바치비 규도 된다 봐요데 디신십이 숨겨지를 빼나 아니 디신십이 숨어 된바인데 아니 빼나 양면에 대바 시는 시바신습니다 마게 제라마요 꾸주기 띵식들라 루벨인데 지기 준저 제어와 디신십이 숨겨지를 세도 군수부 온도치는 숨아래 되는 온도치와 숨아래 군수다 되는 가양 마인비 아니 진짜지 요 말했습니다 마 따바치니 까다나 따윤디 다 군수다 되는 가양 마인비 군소다 되는 가야 마루나 따디르와 메고바 당 아니 추비치메니도다 마추비치메니도 가야메나 메고바니 균전 송바레스 이두산에 다 저랑게 마치라 말라인데 아니 군소다 되는 가야 마루베티니 딘데지 송주지 요 말레스 이두산에 아니 딘데 인즈산에 파다 딘지 마추비 균지 땅 거와 다디 균 땅주디 아니 디당 다 군소다 되는 가야 마루나 메고바 당 추비시비 니도다 마주비 시비 니도 가야 말으나 메고바니 균전 총바 인상 다 딘지 마주비 균데 로벨인데제를 고랑라 요바디 아니 무슨 로벨인데지 케만한자 튀기 케랑라 송와레스 가즈나 균전 파게 파 군조다 되남 가야 마인베드니 요바지 장나 디기 말했으니 로벨인데지게 제라말라 파탄인데 다 군조다 되남 세디 드나 덴바니가 온도신데 추비스면 니도다 마주비스면 니도 가야 마인 바지 강로도 마루나 메고바디 아니 켈렌과 송와 균전 총바레스 뉴스는 다 디비 균전 총비 고한테니 고념될 때네 로아다지 바들라 때네 아니 가지레 올로벨인데 지게 진다 다지요로 와든다 다게메 바주비 딘지지 미소나게 제전나 저 된다마 달미제데 예비시시 어때 딘디비 딘지들라 아니 고랑게 란고조 딘지들라 딘지 시마주비 교요바디 된게 켈랑고 차와레스 어디 도우시네 무슨 켈레 말이었으나 티켈레 말데 이내양 파견주 좋아들 아니라 수표인데 아니 라니게 켈랑고 차기제스 켈랑고 좋아디가스나 파땅도 리바디네 땅도 와서 군주다 되는 가야만 비유주지 강로면나 메고발라도 다 군주다 되는 세디 대번이가 온도시는 수는데 아니 추비스면 여도당 마주비스면 여도 가야만이나 메고바디 켈렌자 띵지 로벨인데 고랑게 고조게 따들라양 아니 띵지 마주비 교요바디 튕기 켈랑고 차기래 소다 디바 점지 송샤송
That being the case, the question, which of the two truths is it, is conceived of as a question regarding which of the two consciousnesses it is that finds the reason. It has to be one of those two options. 4. If the object stated as a reason is neither the conventional nor the ultimate, then that reason cannot be established. Also, if the object stated as a reason is not an object found by either a non-mistaken or mistaken consciousness, then the object stated as the reason cannot be established. In that the reasons are parallel, Chandrakirti states that Bhavavika himself accepts that his reason, because of existing, is not established. But he does not say that Bhavavika accepts this explicitly. Okay, so this is the flaw being pointed out by Chandrakirti and Bhavavika's reason because of existing. Again, that's in his refutation, the syllogism, which is refuting self-production by Bhavavika, where he says the subject, the eyes and so forth, the internal sources, they are not produced because they exist like consciousness. So that's the reason, because they exist. What Chandrakirti or Tsongkhapa is pointing out here about Chandrakirti's position is that Bhavavika's flaw that he points out in the Vaibhashika reason, right, is somehow parallel or analogous to his own reason, and so the flaw therefore comes to be applicable to his own syllogism and his own reason in it. So it's because of that the parallel or sort of the congruence between his own refutation, Bhava Viveka's own refutation of the Vaibhashika, and then his way of positing the reason. So it's sort of this thing where it's like Chandakirti is kind of using the reasoning of a parallel argument, and it's not something that Bhava Viveka explicitly himself says, but it's this kind of reasoning based on, what Bhava Viveka has to come to accept based on what he has already explicitly said. So this is the again reason that Bhava Viveka points out the flaw in the Vaibhashika position, because the Tathagata has said so, right? The whole reason, going back to it, is the causes that serve to bring about the internal sensory faculties and such are existent without qualification. This is the case because the Tathagata said they are, for whatever the Tathagata has said is accurate, as in the case of his teaching that nirvana is peace. So that was the reason Bhava Viveka is making this analysis of two truths. So again, what was his question? So is that in terms of the conventional that the Tathagata has said it, or is it in terms of the ultimate? So this is, right, the analysis of the two truths that Bhava Viveka is making. And then he's saying, well, there is no existent thing, no object, no phenomenon, which is neither of the two truths, right? So if you say it's neither, then it's going to be a non-established reason. Reason's not established, not true. And so Chandakirti is now saying, well, that's equivalent to asking, is it an object found by a non-mistaken valid cognition, or is it an object found by a mistaken valid cognition? Okay, because those same, likewise, there is no phenomenon, no existent thing, which is neither an object found by a non-mistaken consciousness, nor an object found by a mistaken consciousness. It's just like saying there is no object that is neither conventional truth nor an ultimate truth. Okay, so Chandrakirti, that's the congruent thing, right? That's the parallelism here. Saying, is it ultimate truth or conventional truth, is parallel to saying, is it an object found by a non-mistaken cognition or mistaken cognition? So this is why he's saying that Bhava Viveka kind of comes to have to accept this implicitly, even though he doesn't explicitly ever state that. Okay, so it's this kind of the equivalency being shown there, equivalence being shown there. So that again comes up when Bhava Viveka himself gives his reason to refute this self-production. Again, the reason because it exists.
Oh yeah. Teacher ngubi chu dinzu su ko ba nam shi ngubi chu migi kani sungus. Dawa di kar sungus na da chiksan na arwa. Da ngubi chu da kasna ngubi chu sni mixu kani da kasna lube lindi ji gisinda dinzi kandi ji kwe na ya arwa ganga ngubi chu su di rangi tsini jubi. Arwa rangi tsini jubi shishaagi toni kwe ba shada yinba di inzang ani dinda di daje gubi dinzi dila dinzi shima jubi kyo yoba mase 로벨이 지금 저기 다 간리지네 띵지 심어 주비 교 요바디 아니 탱고 두그래 요바디 가서는 근데 직선으로 빠는다 와서 소에 되러와 뭐비 최스네 rangi 친이 줘 시지게 되니 고고로 와스 이제 다 로벨이 지금 주비 띵지 틴다디 다제고비 띵지디 아니 가서는 띵지 심어 주비 교 요바디 케랑고와디 무슨 숨발 때는 로벨이 지금 되니 고저기 띵지 신다요 그봐 아니 띵시신다 강아 아니 가스나 아니 디 꾼도 요바 좀 되네 좀 개랑 와레스 둔다 가스나 랑게 친이 마주바 시시게 되네 그거래 랑게 친이 마주베 되네 최전라 아니 마주비 친미니 되세게 니든지 샤요 말에 인도산이 디 꾼디 아니 띵시 챤라요 충분히 다 직선나라 가스나 다 빠는다 와차고 숨해디 그봐 다 로벨인지게 다 주위 띵시 가릴 거나요 랑주기 띵지 시샤신 꾸용 거와 티인들 랑게 친니 주비 최진 띵도 주자 보여기 딘이랑 친구들이 다 온도진 송인상 무비 취였으니 믹스 간에더니 마 송에디 된다 되래. 소다 저름지디 송도
the
이게 친구들 봐.
secret secret.
어디로 뒤가서 반대 다와 잡고 치사기 치지. 다 치사
Right.
무비 취 되는데 랑 친구들이 제랑
That is why Chandrakirti, in his clear words, specifies reified thing when he states in any argument that posits a reified thing as the reason. So now there's this reference to the clear words and this one term, reified thing, because Tsongkhapa is pointing out that actually, because of the way that Chandrakirti is talking about this, any argument that posits a reified thing as the reason, he's saying that all the arguments would also come to be arguments or reasons that are not established, have that same flaw. And that's because the whole basis for Bhavaveka's approach to using reasoning and these syllogisms is he has the basic perspective, right, coming from the basis that the reason is something that is here the phrase a reified thing, but another phrase you could use is something that is established by an intrinsic character, established with its own intrinsic character. So that's all of Bhavavega's reasons are then, right, he's kind of the basis of his position is that these are all autonomous syllogisms and autonomous reasons. Okay, so that's why in whatever reason he gives and all the other parts, so even though the main focus of Chandrakirti's refutation here was in this reason because it exists, right, and this the syllogism, take the subject, the eyes, and so forth, they are not produced from themselves because they exist. So that's the main thing being analyzed, but now Tsongkhapa is pointing out that it actually applies to all the reasons Bhavaviveka gives, because he's using as the basis for his reasoning the notion of autonomous syllogisms, which is these reified things that are established by way of an intrinsic character. So that's, and then again, that's not established because things are not established. There is no phenomenon that is established by way of its own intrinsic character. So they all would be reasons that are not established, having this same flaw. So that's the meaning again from the clear words, that text by Chandrakirti, in the phrase specifically used there throughout his analysis, throughout his refutation of Bhavaveka of reified things.
뭐야 어두치다 안디와라 로벨린데지니 랑기급이 따대다 가진이 무슨 맞추비 무슨 당스 가진이 탈두비 줍지기 무슨 맞추바 무슨 맞추발라 셰메장 로벤디 고바이노스타 다디가도 가르송 거스는 다든다 로벨 베나 빠네 다와 타와기 로벨린데지라 아니 지갈르다 가바지 레고레 로벨린데지기 양 마게 두다 호망고에 모알 가바지 레고 달 로벨 수수기로와 빠네 다와 타바게다 로벨린데지라 파 가바체인데 로벨린데지기 랑게 친인 주바 켈레바 시지기 땡니 숭우도 순이다 디기 말에선 딘데지 돈이로와 아니 바이 가바되자고래 달 로벨린데지기 다 영웅에 마와라 바 가바자인데 양 퇴연담바 요바 시지기 땡니 숭우도 라기도 디기민도 무슨 딘데지 돈이 바 가바자인데 다 딘다데 빠네 다와 타바기로와 빠네 다와 타바게 되니 로벨린데지라 걔도 로벨린데지기 되니 추진 다 흐르지네 무슨 야나니 추진 다도서 무슨 세미 무슨 주바와 무슨 세미 엄부 무슨 세미 맞추베 무슨 주베 다지 샤와다 가시 양 엄부 무슨 세미 맞추베 무슨 맞추장 파 타두나 엄부 무슨 세미 맞추바지라 타두고바디 되고바디 로벨린데지기 되네 되고 요바디 되네 되고래 스타르 디르와 로벨린데지기 된다 빼나 다지 거서와 사주전 된다면 사용원이 많은데 중화인비실 있은 다고인데 중화디 ombu ngosum cheme 아니 ngosu 주비 다 차대로와 ombu다 ombu ngosum 대 ombu ngosum 맞추비 cheme yin 세월와 가스나 랑게 친이 주바 나메철라 맞추비 chema 세지 샤고와 다나신 아니 가르레 미소 난게 제지는 지지 된다 봐요 된다 봐 달미게 유비시 다제 미비딘시디 양 텐데 요바디 ngosum ombu ngosum cheme 맞추비 ngosum 맞추장 탑둥나 아니 ombu ngosum chema 맞추바 투그레 신도르즈도나 ombu ngosum 대 아니 맞추바라 옹붕고숨 세메 두 세마디 마주비 옹붕고숨 세마지 샤인데 로벨니 이게 되는 수마디 빠는 다와 잡아 디까 한 거레스 가스나 텐데 옹고숨 세마도 강가 추비 세마자냐레스 가스나 텐데 옹고숨 든조 강가 아니 말이 바제길래 베토비 안데 랑게 친이 마주비자 랑게 친이 주바 나와 샤다게 돈이 되는 시장에서 안데 랑게 친이 주바 나와 나시 되라 랑게 친이기 마주와 인상 빠는 다와 잡아기 다 랑게 친이 주바디 메서 로벨인데 지게 랑게 친이 주바 인스고로와 아니 랑게 친이 주바 나와 나시 되라 랑게 친이 주바레 랑게 친이 주바 나메샤라 마추바 텐데 쳔바든조 랑게 친이 주바 나메샤라 마추바 인스고로와 다 빠는 다와 잡아기 랑게 친이 주바 나수디 나수 추바레스 로와 랑은 다 랑게 친이 주바 나게 셰바 컨디지네요 아니 나수 추바 차와레 나왔다도 되라 랑게 친이 주바디 요마레스 랑은 주비 추진 요마레 세워디 디케지 시엔데 다 랑게 친이 주바 나메샤라 마추비 쳔미니데 레 싱인데 로벨인데 지체 빠는 다와 잡아기 텐드비 쳔마도 조더니 바두지 쳔마도 요마레 스니더니 까면데 쳔마디기 니든기 추진데요 아니 마주바디 다 바게 가바디 된게 된 거레스 어디든지 숨도
The master Bhavaveka believes that, of the reasons he posits, some are directly established by non-mistaken perception, while others are not, but are proofs that finally derive from non-mistaken perception. This master Chandrakirti refutes this. So there's these two different refutations from the two different masters. So Chandrakirti making the refutation of Bhavaveka, and then Bhavaveka making the refutation of the essentialists. And so for Bhavaveka, he goes about positing his reasons, making his syllogisms from the basic perspective of things or phenomena being established by way of their own characteristics, either by way of an intrinsic identity. And so this is what Chandrakirti is pointing out is not acceptable or logical. It's not true. And Bhavaveka then himself is pointing out in his refutations of the essentialists, well, they are basing their perspective when they make their syllogisms on the basis that phenomena are ultimately established. And so Bhavaveka is pointing out to them that's not acceptable, that's not logical. So that's sort of because of that, then Chandrakirti can go and say, well, all the reasons that Bhavaveka is making because have the same flaw because so he's saying, well, the reasons have to be established by either some reasons or have to be established by directly by a valid or not a valid direct perception, and others maybe not established directly by valid perception, direct perception, but at least they ultimately come to be come to be based in some direct valid cognition. They end up meeting with some direct valid cognition. Okay, so and that, so for instance, his reason, again, the one we've been talking about, the eyes and so forth, inner sources are not produced from themselves because they exist, is one reason. And then the other reason that came up a few pages ago, take the subject Earth, it follows that it is, I forget what the middle part was, but that's okay, because it is an element. Okay, that was the reason given there. So, he's saying that those are things that have to be established by a valid direct perception, valid cognition, direct perception. So, but for him, for Bhavavika, that means that, right, they have to be what is a valid cognition, a direct perception, valid cognition. It's something where it's a non-mistaken direct perception that is not mistaken with regards to the appearance, that aspect of the appearance of the thing being established by its intrinsic character. So it's non-mistaken with respect to that that part of the appearance. And so this whole notion of non-mistaken, right, sensory direct perceptions that are valid cognitions, Chandrakirti refutes, right? Chandrakirti refutes it because that appearance is something that is produced by the taints of the imprints of ignorance. So that part of the appearance to the consciousness is to direct sensory perceptions that makes the object appear as though it is established by way of its own intrinsic character is a mistaken appearance, because they appear to be established by way of intrinsic character, yet they are not established by way of an intrinsic character, right? There are no phenomena that are established from their own side. So that is a mistaken appearance. So the any subject that is posited, that is this kind of, that is said to be an object found by this kind of valid cognition, a non-mistaken direct perception, valid cognition, is also refuted by Chandrakirti.
도도시 디양 nga changba umabayi na choshin khe langba mibi chiri she rangi tsinigi dhubi tuyan khe langba miribi dhubje du kade ngusum la sokba she soke chane rangzen jawi tsema meba sungba namgi lobe lenden chigi cho zimba la dhubi chiri usta luzani da jirim chigi khung di karsana panen dawa chaba girwa rangi tsini dhuba nangwe chala dini ma dhubi tsema jiro ti nidu meba di 다 얘기 강라 직선 나라로 직색이 디앙아 정바다르스 nga 가와 직색이 나라 갈정을스는 여기 직색이 흉디나라 우마바 이나 초신 케랑바 미비치르스나 우마바 이나 초신 가르스나 랑기 친이 두바 케레 지기 말해스 우마바 이나 가스나 로베른디지처럼 우마바레스 우마바 이나 랑기 친이 두바 케레 지기 말해스 어디 부시네로와 다 랑기 친이 두바 케레 미르 균센들라 아니 전도의 룽장네 전도 공부루주의 룽와 공부루주의 전도의 룽 가대 웃음 라서바 등에 가시면은 두바 제바 도나디 메징하라 랭가 메스 슝디다 얘기 가나 가진 전도의 룽디 쿵장소와 다 가르스나 계세 랑이 친이 두바 켈렌 지기 말 랑이 친이 두바 켈렌 미려와디 공부루주의 전도 나라 갈렌다 제비고는 송도와 스니 공부루주의 슝디 계세 랑이 친이 두바 요나 아니 저랑 랑이 친이 두바 마추비 체마 저랑게 되에 나신기 아니 무슨 체마 시기 마추비 니된도 샤고알레 텐데 무슨 체마 마추바 시기 니된게 텐데 아니 최지면서 아니 갈라 랭가 메 스니 공부룬주기로와 어디 디 렌자의 쿵장는데 디게로와 텐데스니다 파 숭에디 아니 반에 다와 잡아 술라 숭얼스나 루벨린데 제다 루벨린데 지게 진단도라 되니 바 흉디 쿵장네로와 아니 두바레 스칼 두바르스나 랑게 신년 주비 나위차라 아니 마투비 세마지 메와지 로와 디 메와 인상 다 가리레 랑게 신년 주바 나위차라 마투비 세메니도 메상 아니 가리레 디 균생기 아니 랑게 신년 주바 켈레 지기 마레스 그래서 랑게 신년 주바 요나 랑게 신년 주바 나위 차라 마주비 세마지 샤워치도 디 요마레스 디 메와디 리베 두제 디 가스나 랑이 신이 주바 낭주 메와디 리베 두제 고네수 롱기 두제 데니 공부루 두기 쫀도기 슝디 공장니 아니 치사나 송에디 빠는다 와주비 송에디 로벨린디지기 젠장 로벨린지기 데니 초진바스도 랑이 신이 주바 켈랭게 로벨린디지기와 아니 저워치비 랑주비다 젠장 데니 뒤돌아 데니 디 슝디 고네 두샤스 칼 두샤스나 랑게 친이 주바 나위 차라 마주비 체마 메바디 로와 인도산에다 도르수드나 로벨린데 젤라 소바다 데멘지게 가르스나 아니 체마 시체네로 아다 체마 다 도르수드나 수소군주비 수소의 최남 원봉고순 세마 맞추비 니드인 봐. 로다 도르수드나 체마시 로왕고순 체마이나 아니 랑게 친이 주바 나웨차라 맞추비 체마인 거와. 랑게 친이 주바 나웨차라 맞추비 체미니드 마이나 아니 메고와. 오다 딘데지기 되는데 아니 팀 메비 콩데라 아니 룽기 주바 주제당 리뷰 주지 이거네 아니 그 빠네 나와 잡아기 치세나 송도와 오다 디기 아니 세가 되는데 아니 랑게 친이 주바 켈레 지기 말에 그래서 준신 송당지당 전도의 룽콩장단이 단연데 아니 랑게 친이 주비차라 랑게 친이 주바 나위차라 마주비 치미니 되세지 요 말에스 와 오다 디빠네 나와 잡고 가그 콩디 오다 딘스 주는 것도
To prove that it is incorrect to accept objects that exist by way of their intrinsic character, the earlier citation from the clear words, Madhyamikas do not accept others' positions, quotes passages such as the refutation of objections stanza that begins, if perception and so forth, by drawing from such citations the conclusion that there are no valid cognitions that perceive intrinsic character. Chandrakirti aims to prove this point to the partisans of Master Bhavavika's system. So then Tsongkhapa is closing this section by referencing again these two sources, Chandrakirti and also Nagarjuna. And so Chandrakirti says that there is no, the kind of final conclusion, Chandrakirti is saying that there does not exist any object that is found by a non-mistaken valid cognition that is non-mistaken with respect to the appearance of an object being established by way of intrinsic character. And so that was previously cited with these quotations, the previously cited quotations are getting to this point. Their meaning is to show this. And so the point Chandrakirti is making is that, well, for Bhavavika then, because again, this quote from Nagarjuna himself, from the refutation of objections, it shows it's not reasonable, it's not acceptable to assert the establishment of objects by way of an intrinsic character, or objects being established by way of an intrinsic character. So the quotation that was cited earlier in the text by Nagarjuna there, it says it begins if perception and so forth. So Geshe said the entire quotation, but I don't have it memorized, but it was earlier in the text. So that was pointing out this very point, right? That the so this was like during this refutation of objections, where Nagarjuna sort of posits these criticism that comes from the essentialist, and then gives the response to them, and shows that there's no contradiction in his assertions and his positions, and so he refutes this, the existence of intrinsic character, establishment by intrinsic character, because first saying that there are no there are no valid cognitions that are non-mistaken with respect to the appearance of being established by intrinsic character. So because there are no such valid cognitions, then there are no objects found by a valid cognition that is non-mistaken with respect to its object appearing as though it is established by way of intrinsic character. Because of that, then we can, it follows, or we can understand that there simply are no things established by way of intrinsic character. Being established by intrinsic character doesn't exist. So this point is being shown here by Tsongkhapa, both through logic, right, through the reasoning and logic itself, and then also through the quotations of Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna, and he's pointing out to Bhavavika's followers, those Svatantrika Madhyamikas, those followers of the middle way autonomy school is pointing out these flaws in their position that, comes down to this point that, in summary, when they say that the reasons and everything, the parts of a syllogism have to be established by these non-mistaken valid cognition, non-mistaken direct perceptions. Well, Nagarjuna points out that there are no such, right, things, because there are no objects that are found by non-mistaken valid cognitions that are non-mistaken with respect to the appearance of being established by intrinsic character.
Oh yeah, that tinda dini niba rangla tsumba rangla mi tsumba tsulusu subject niba chöla di subject kongma dila. Ani rangju tenzi gosu dila dini chöchen shima chubi kyun dang tenzi shima chubi kyun sinda di yenji ki subject nangdun dila. Da nangdun zogo di kasana da kandisin chöwa re se kechi shen yundu dan di shiji majana kono te nyinga chiga karisana lupi panen dawa chabagi lupi lindin jela da pa kaba jaya di. 즉 진짜 갈라오스나 따위 찬이로와 다 동료도베 따와 깨와라 랑주기 띵지 거래 슬루벨인데 지게 랑주기 띵지기 땡네 동료도베 따와지 때라 바고 다 받는 다와 잡아기 아니 랑주기 띵지기 땡네 동료도베 따와게 용구 말에 랑주기 띵지 줍지기 제바 문두 스니로와 동료도베 따와 깨와라 예바도 현자기 띵지 거래 띵지 지단 띵지 거 말에 이내 계속 거고 있는 현자기 띵지 거래 랑주기 띵지 요 말에 동료도베 따와 깨와 동료도베 따와 아니 로와 어디 줍지기 세마 아니 딘지지 돈이기나 랑주기 딘지 네버도 거고 말 랑주 딘지 거라 요 말에 스미위다 미비 kyön들아 랑주기 딘지들아 계속 저랑 샤오의 딘지들아 요나 아니 딘지 샤오도 딘지 딘지들아 최진 시마 주비 kyön당 딘지 시마 주비 kyön도 디 요바디 저랑게 켈레고 지기래 있습니다 반내다와 저와기 가바 자도 랑주기 딘지데 파 kyön주 체와와 kyön주 지당디 니기고니 최진 시마 주비 초기 kyön당 딘지 마주비 kyön니여봐 다 kyön디 요바디 르벨린데 지랑니기에 켈랑바레 스니 다 무슨 개만인자 개랑고 지그래 스니 다 균생당 집어 디엔지라 송해디 동료도 따와 따위 전에 다 모두 지기 주비 전에 다 르벨린데 지당 받에 다와 잡아니라 가봐 자고 니주 요말 담면서 받에 다와 잡아게 되니 주비 차마 때라 표현디 아니 르벨린데 지기 슝 시라 주미 청와도 콩장니 아니 주비기 남샤도 벨 레자망불 링니마 지시 잡여리 이내 된다 뒤에 고바 자디 동료도 로와 동료 줍지게 직바디라 아니 랑주기 띵스 고래 에서 로벨인데 지기로와 아니 추진 아니 공원이 위투난도 줍이 추진게 띵도 아니 띵 줍자 줍이 띵스 지 고래 에서 로벨인데 지 가진 케렌 주연디 디고용도와 오 가스나 나고 니게 투난도 줍이 추진게 띵도 아니 줍자 줍아 지긴 고래 에서 다 동료도 따와디 딘데 띵스 딘데지라 띵이 게용 그래 에서 게용데 다 띵스디 추바 이바디 봐 아니 저디 다 tuk사데 가와 투고르다 랑게 친이 주바 켈레 말인 거 대투거다 루베르니 지 송에데 랑게 친이 주바 시지게 땡니 송고레 다 반네 다와 잡아게 랑게 친이 주비 추진디 요 말레스 최담제 로이던 로든 또베다 파다 좀레 로와 랑은 주비 추진 랑싱 주비 추진 랑게 친이 주비 추진디 요 말레 스니바 오다 디마 디인상 돈유도 따와게 돈이다 아 최베드니 가바데 레고르마도 지기 양 진짜 가봐 잘했어도 답직 총 강가라 한 두고 비술 팀 멤버 진들와 티 코노마테 와체 다 디sabje 디 인제 디 낭된들라 다아 레벨인데 저랑게 란주게 띵수 되어야들라 계속 되어봐이나 딜라드니 추진에 대해 샤투면도 계시디로와 디 줍제게 되니 되니 가서 균세에 되니 가서 심마주가 되고도스 아니 균세 거사기 강사다 그게 강사 니가게 투난도 줍베더니 균세지 요 말에스 로와 치매도 투노지 민도 소다 디반에 다와잡이 파가는데 다 소드니 다 디바로 가지기 좁아지 좋아래 딘데 있나 다 랑주기 딘지라 딘데 껴요나 아니 현자기 딘지들라 껴는데 도도 스나더니 랑라 미숨비 출루 센다스 니바 낭되디 디가스로와 다 탄주비 고여기 현자기 딘지라 디껴요 말에 쓴다 디니마이 디 sab지니와 디기 낭되 디네스마 최용도스
Okay, chapter 21, our critique of Svatantrika does not hurt our own arguments. Section B, why the faults we find in autonomous arguments do not apply to us. So just to introduce this new chapter here, to review kind of how we got here. This is, kind of following from the previous discussions and chapters. So where does it come from? Why is this chapter here? So there was this analysis of autonomous reasons, autonomous syllogisms and autonomous reasons. So, and Chandrakirti made a refutation of autonomous reasons. So he did that by way of refuting, a refutation of autonomous syllogisms. He did that by way of refuting the, by showing that the subjects are not established in an autonomous syllogism, and also the reason is not established in an autonomous syllogism. So Chandrakirti is refuting Bhava Viveka in the previous sections. And this is all in reference to the development of the view. Okay, all of this back and forth debate is about developing the view, and it arises because Bhava Viveka asserts that in order to generate the view realizing emptiness for any individual, it must be done by positing an autonomous syllogism. That's the only way to generate the view of emptiness. So Chandrakirti position is that that's not correct. It can be done by using a syllogism that is a syllogism of renown, that is a syllogism, what was it phrased here? Syllogism. I'm just looking for the term that's used for this, the English term, but see where it comes in. Okay, so it's, yeah, it's kind of a long phrase for this simple term, but it's these, right, I said, like, these are the two kinds of syllogisms here that are being discussed and shown, which is usable, which is not usable. So there's the autonomous syllogism. Okay, that's a simple term, but for the other one that Chandrakirti accepts, it has this whole phrase here: arguments based on what the other party accepts. So just get used to that phrasing. So Chandrakirti says that syllogisms based on what the other party accepts, those are what are to be used to generate the view of emptiness. And not only that, but autonomous syllogisms don't even exist the way that Bhavavika, is insisting that they do. So he made those two kinds of criticisms there, Chandrakirti, of the subject and then of the reason. And then pointed out that in the section refuting that showing that the reasons are not established in autonomous syllogisms, pointed out that Bhavavegas himself actually comes to accept the flaw that is in his own position through his analysis, right, of the two truths and everything that was just said. Not that he explicitly ever says that, but again, he comes to have to accept it through his own analysis and his own criticism of the essentialists. Okay, so this again is talking about really only developing the view of emptiness. So there, again, the idea of the autonomous syllogism is that there's a commonly appearing subject between both the defender and challenger in the debate, and that it's only kind of on the basis of, right, it's only within this situation of there being a shared experience of a subject between two parties, challenger and the defender. It's only within this context or in this situation that the view of emptiness will arise, the view realizing emptiness. Okay, so all of this again comes back to the question of, right, does the master accept that the subjects are established by way of intrinsic identity, or do they not accept whether they're established by way of intrinsic identity? So for Chandrakirti, right, he does not accept that. He accepts instead that Instead of phenomena being established by way of intrinsic identity, they are merely designated out there. So this is being analyzed, and all these arguments are being made again about the generation of the view of emptiness. Now, whether or not it applies to other types of reasoning, and other reasoning, it's not it's not being said here whether it applies to other things. This is really talking about developing the view of emptiness. So this is the section now that we're starting is coming from all that discussion, because now the doubt kind of it has to be addressed. Well, Chandrakirti just pointed out all these flaws in autonomous reasons, autonomous syllogisms. So then, do those same flaws apply to also the syllogisms that are based on what the other party accepts? And so Tsongkhapa is now going to point out why they do not apply to syllogisms based on what the other party accepts.
뭐야? 니바랑라 미송비 추니스 카데 신기 제바라 추진당 다마주바 속에 꽤 남 랑게 제바라양 균도 주와 마이남 대나 신라 가와 미샤오 냠나스다 디치와디 트와다 슝기 주시디 트여치도 다 치와디 딤딘지 렘나스 오르바 다 가스나 다랑라 미송비 준센데 제시자에다 가데 디바로라다 다 도바치긴 지르와 가데다 신게 지수 바발라스디 제바스는다 디르와 지당 제바스인데 로지라와 된다 디갑수 제바디 아니 신된 제바 공도신 지당 제바들라 랑된 제바다 신된 제바 니스니마 시행거래 랑된 제바스도 제바 로와 군제한다라 때네 하고인게 로 세마지라 제바스에들와 다 된다 제바디 신된 제바 로와 신된 제바 있습니다. 신된 제바들아 중화당 다 뒤서 되는 거로와 다 주윙아도서 오다 디가스로와 가디 신기 제바라 쓴다. 가디 다 디바로라 지기 총아지 다 총알라고 다 디바로라 독바지 되마이 나서 그래. 가르스니로와 아니 신기 로벨린데 군나족의 캐런족의 땡지 아니 제바 로와 딘데 중바도서라 최제다 땡지 마주비 제바 딘데 있나 아니 루빠는 다와 잡아 계란기 되니 꾸역이 땡지들라요 꾼든도 좀 말해외스 주제 마주비 꾼당 아니 땡지 마주비 꾼요 말해외스 딘데나 아니 셰라더니 셰 루벨인데 제라 가바트네 자와데 지금 말해 신다 디바루라 도바지 쳐와래 오다 디드니 루벨 린데지기 땡지들라 꾼요 바당 빠는 다와 잡아 꾸역이 땡지들라 꾼 매바디 아니 다 디니마 아니 디시디 자외기 디니 취식이 제도다 디도바디 거바래 그와 인도전다 최진 심마주비 껴나 딘지마주비 껴니 다이가 땅사소와 가스나로벨인데 지기 아니 최진 아니 디니 관계 이제 개발도 마주비 최진 찌즈마 셰그스는 디디기 말해스 다디 최진들 교연 당연히 아니 디니 관계 개발도 마주비 딘지디야 요 말은상 팀만이 딘지 메나든 딘지 메바 죽을도 로벨인데 지기 디 캐낭바레 쓴다 교연 저완상 다 텐데베다 추진당 딘지 마주비 교연디 아니 탄주비 되게 다 루벨인데 받는다와 잡아기 시에기 현장에 딘지라한테 교연디 요르베스 교연디 요나 루벨인데 제가 교연지 치와도 지금 말해스 이들은 다 디시엔데 다 교연디 메비 콩디 다 디마 와라 방진이 송도스 아니 디갑도 다 고고에들아 랑자기 딘지당 가서 랑주기 딘지당 현장에 딘지니기 에와신 랑주기 딘지 세데 랑게 친인 주비 추진기 띵도 랑게 친인 주비 주자 보면 주는 띵식 다 추진으로 공하고 니게 치매주도 투나위 추진기 띵도 런 주주치 주바 지행기로와 띵식지라 랑주기 띵식 세팅되지치 현장의 띵식 스디 아니 가스나 나고 추진다 따디 나고 랑이라 자신 주바 마세 나고를 심비 지격이 지한테 자신 주바스나 당 지고당 나고 니가 계량도 요바 추진다 따디 어 딘지기 딘지지 거네 아니 두고나 현장의 딘지 있어다 딘지 디다 현장의 딘지디 단주비 반에 다와 잡아 혼란속에 송외기 딘지 디레 현장의 딘지로 랑주비 루벨인지 코는 송외디 랑주기 딘지 어다 두신 딘이기 나네 랑주기 딘지라 교여 현장의 딘지라 교메 서다 디균전이 디네 마치 시작하면도
the Shindagi Tensis and Agare?
闲茶是的，我国让你了茶话马赛，出现的大的，我国让你给开联吧马赛，俺你去过给讲开联过完是闲是的，我国让你了闲被去过了，是吧？他的去过给开，我国让你给开联吧马赛，我国让你了闲被去过了给开联吧是，我的这闲茶是闲是的闲聊的地的，
Nice.
嗯。
Nago Kelemba Masai Chigo and Kelembas.
哦，就电视上出现的电视电话，嗯，
Okay, so now uh, so do our arguments not have the same faults that we find in others' arguments, such as the subjects and reasons not being established? And if they do, should we not refrain from finding contradictions in others' arguments? I think that's all. Just introducing the discussion here. So this is like, these are the questions that could be asked, right? After Chandrakirti goes and went and refuted all of this positions about Vega and these autonomous syllogisms. Now these questions come. So why shouldn't these, what is the reason for why these same faults, these same flaws don't come in Chandrakirti's position? So here, the word argument here is actually uh, the word which generally is translated as inference. And when we talk about inferences, normally an inference, so this is in the statement or sentence, do our arguments, right? The word argument there, that's what I'm referring to. The Tibetan is the word inference. And then the inferences have two types. Generally, they are a mind, right? An inference is a mind, consciousness or mind. But there's actually two types of inferences that are explained. There's inferences for oneself and then inferences for others. For other inferences for others, then are, instead of being minds, are, syllogisms and, any of these kinds of logical um, kind of forms that are expressions of speech, right? That are expressed through speech. So this is why. So that's why the English translation committee just used the word argument, because they already, they knew that, so they just understood and translated it that way. But just that's, and I guess Geshe made that explanation about it, so I had to explain why Geshe said that. So anyway, so it's, even though it says inference, it's referring to inference for others, which means syllogisms and logical arguments that are expressed through speech. Okay, so then, right, this is the kind of doubt that can come, these questions. And when so when again, what was being done is Chandrakirti said, okay, the subjects not established in the autonomous syllogisms, the reasons also not established, those are the flaws in the autonomous syllogism. So then don't they also apply to Chandrakirti, right? Or why shouldn't they apply to Chandrakirti? So if they do, then then it wouldn't be appropriate to make those reputations of Bhaviveka if the same flaws apply to Chandrakirti himself. So then uh, he has to show Natsang Prabhu has to show the reason why those flaws do not apply to Bhaviveka. Um, oh, So what was the thing being said? Bhavaveka had his main statement there was that when you're positing a reason, then a subject or subject or whatever it is, but the reason subject, when you're positing it in this argument, you have to posit one that is not characterized by anything whatsoever, just the generality, right? That's how you have to posit a subject. Chandakirti pointed out there is no such subject that is not qualified by anything. So that was all explained before. That's the flaw, right? The flaw that is in the autonomous syllogism. There is no such subject. And so it's, Tsongkhapa is coming to show why that doesn't apply to Chandakirti and the syllogisms based on what other party accepts. And again, what are these two kinds of syllogisms? Okay, Bhavaveka accepts the autonomous syllogisms. Chandakirti accepts the syllogisms based on what the other party accepts. So what is an autonomous syllogism? The ones Bhavaveka accepts, those are syllogisms where there's something being established or being proven, right? The thesis to be proven is being proven from within a situation where the two parties, challenger and defender, have a commonly appearing subject, which is appearing to be established by which is established by way of the object's own characteristics or the object's intrinsic character. Okay, so that's how an autonomous syllogism. That's what an autonomous syllogism is. And what is a syllogism based on what the other party accepts? That is simply a syllogism where the subject and the reason are not only accepted by the challenger, but they are also accepted by the defender. So what does it mean that what the other party accepts? It means you being the challenger, the other being the defender. So not only are the subject and reason accepted by the challenger, they are also accepted by the other, the defender.
Oh yeah. Tēnā xiān lā gāwā mishtuñim nā xiān lā gyōn tētā wōngwā nī rāngyū kī jebā kē lāngbē chūng lās, kō jā nī rāngyū kī jebā kē mīlīmbē gyōn tētā mē bā sūng dēs, dīr jebā nām nī jōwā lā chā wōs, tā tī tētā tō yōng duwa, wā dō shi nī, tā tēnē rwa tā rāngyū bē tindā gōngyū kī, tā lō bē lī nī jī khunā sō gōngyū kī tīnzī tī lā, chūshīn shī mā rwa tā, tā mā rwa gyōn yōwā tī, rāngyū kī tīnzī kē lī mī nē kī chūng wā rēs. rwa 아니 코자 반에 다 잡아다 rwada 단주비 제랑 그래서 아니 랑주게 띵지 켈링이 말했어 랑주게 띵지 레 신비 띵지지 현장에 띵지 오다 띵지 켈링 뭐 온기 아니 쩐디 요 말했어 딜라로 추진 심어 주비 쩐다 아니 조주 아니 띵지 마주비 쩐디 요 말했어 오다 진짜 디나라 인다 칙삭이 나나다 마 진짜 딘디마 제바 스케줄 시에디 제바디 로라 멤버치 아니 좋아라 띵지라 고거래서 제름지게 대송도 딜 제바 남니 좋아라 차우 서와다 인다디 아니 진다디 제바기 계저디 교육이 된다디 제바디 아니 좋아 띵지라 고거래서 로다 이마 되가서는 열라임바 제바들라 랑된 제바다 신된 제바스 니 된거래 신된 제바디 제바 따봐 봐이 나 이놈비도 숨거와 어디 체인데다 도르수드나 최진 시마주비 교연당 띵지 시마주비 교연데 르벨리니 지게 띵지들라 요와디 랑주기 띵지 시샤돈이 시행도 와스 자 랑주기 띵지 시샤돈이 시나 교연디 요레스 다 랑주기 띵지 많이 베러와다 코자 스드다 단주비 받는다 와서 봤다 나서바 혼나주기 고교기 띵지들라 아니 랑주기 띵지 켈링 마레스 로와 인도산이 띵지 교연디 요 마레스 다 랑주 띵지가 교연나 간지레스 다 디오니 한지시디 자용도 우스카스로 다니로와
The reason others have those faults lies in their acceptance of autonomous arguments. The clear word states that since we do not accept autonomous arguments, we do not have those faults. Here the term arguments refers to syllogisms. Yeah, that was all Geshe I read. Okay, so here Baba Viveka's position that you have to use these autonomous syllogisms, autonomous reasons. He accepts autonomous syllogisms, and so they have those flaws in them. Chandrakirti and his followers, they do not accept autonomous syllogisms, autonomous arguments. So it's because Baba Viveka accepts autonomous arguments that all these faults come in his position. Chandrakirti doesn't accept autonomous arguments, so then all the flaws that arise from accepting autonomous arguments do not apply to him. They do not apply to Chandrakirti's position. Okay, so this is why they won't have the flaw of the subject not being established, the flaw of the reason not being established. Okay. And so again, Tsongkhapa points out here the term, so it's still funny because it kind of translated it bizarrely, but the term arguments really should say, or to be more literal, the term inferences refers to syllogisms, right? Because again, here argument is a translation for what is normally inference, because there are two types of inferences for oneself and inferences for others. So the real kind of genuine inferences are inferences for oneself. Those are minds, consciousnesses, right? Those are the real inferences, or the genuine ones. Then the sort of inferences that are just kind of, what do they call them? Nicknamed inferences. The ones that are nicknamed inferences are the inferences for others, which are syllogisms. Okay. And so, yeah, Tsongkhapa is going to go on to point out why these, other kinds of reasons that are not autonomous reasons don't have the same flaws as the autonomous, syllogisms. Why the syllogisms that are not autonomous syllogisms do not have those same flaws.
뭐야 랑주 켈레나 랑센라 체마르 규비 체마 고니게 투난도 켈라네스 대 주비 추숨니가라 두바 둡자 둡고라 대단나 체마데 메베 추진라 소바나 마두바 주로스 따데 랑주기 댄스 켈레나 아니 추진 체메 마두비 규연직 댄스 균센데 체메 마두비 규연이 여와디 균센 가리레스나 랑주기 댄스 켈레는데 와 켈레 바이나 가르지스나 랑기 친니 주비 차라 랑기 친니 주비 차라 마주비 체마지 켈레 고 와틴데 마주비 체마지 랑셀라 체마주비 체마 세도와 랑젠라 암드네 마주비 체마지 켈랑네 딘데 체마디 공하고 니게 아니 투난도 주바 체마지 켈라네 딘데 왜 체마디기 나고 나 치고 니가게 투난도 주비 아니 와 투난도 주비 아니 추진기 땡도 아니 추숨 로와타 딘드비 체마지 된다 랑게 친니 주발라 마주비 체마지도와 어디 체메디기 주비 아니 가스나 추숨 다 초주에다 지잡 도잡 다 초주 지잡 도잡은 다마 고디고 나와이나 추진기 띵도 주비 다 그지 신도 초주스 다 주자 주주치라 코나라 주비 다 그지 시원의 지잡 로와 단 도잡스디 주주치고 로조라 메비 아니 주주치 코나라요 봐다 미디쇼라 메바니도 되니 메비드니 균센스도 다른 수도는 균센 코랑 최진된도 주비찬에 조주 주주치도 주주치 최수 주비찬에 제접 주주치 코나라 주비찬에로와 도잡스도 다 미디쇼라 다 가스나 강 주비에게 최디기 미디쇼들라 아니 메바 코나 임비찬에 아니 도잡소다 딘데와 도잡디 수숨디 아니 가스나 랑기 신니 주발라 마추비 체마디기 아니 공하고 니게 투난도 주비 아니 체마지기 땡네 아니 딘데 수숨 주바 켈렘비 땡네로와 오다 딘데 수숨기 준세라 땡네 줍자 주바 오 딘데지 켈렘 와치고레스 오 대달 체마디 메베스리라 랑기 신니 주발라 마추비 체마 딘데지 메와 인상 체마디 주비 수숨세다 줍자 세다 디 체마디기 주비 아니 줍제 세디 요마레스 매상 아니 체마디 메베 추진을 소바나 마두바 주로스 인도산에 다 랑기 친니 주비 나위샤라 마두비 체메니 된게 수숨 나와이나 티 요마레 세마고라 요마레스 랑게 친이 두발라 마투비 세마고라 미디 그 두비 추진고라 가요레스 인도자니 추진 마투비 교나 띠즈 마투비 교세도다 틴데레스 도와 인도자니 저랑게 틴디비 랑주게 띠즈 켈레는데 랑게 친이 두발라 차람 랑게 친이 두발라 세마 두겐기로와 다 도르수드나 랑게 친이 두발 나위차라 마투비 세마지 샤니 티 세메 두비기 아니 최진기 띵도 두자 두비기 띵지지 거나 틴디베드니 세마코라메디 세마디기 두비티 최진 가요레스 인자 다 저런 틴디 랑게 친이 두발라 나위 세마 랑게 친이 두발라 마투비 세미니 되게 최진 나와이나 티 시절에 미세바레스 다 단유비 바까 아니르와 랑게 친이 두발라 마투비 최진기 마투비 세미니 되도 두비 최진지 시마 두바레스 인도자니 아니 저런 최진 시마 두비 교요레 오다랑게 친이 두발 나오면 차라 마투비 세명이 니에든게 띵지 나와이나 티 세마코라면서 틴디비 띵지디 심마 두바레스 오다 틴다디 란주게 띵지 켈레나 추진 세메 마투바단 띵지 세메 마투비 교요와디 란주게 띵지 되는데 가르치스나 랑게 친이 두발 나오면 차라 마투비 세메 되게 두비더니 수숨 공하고 니게 두비 수숨지 켈레네 아니 두자당 두제 진마 샤윈데 틴데지 시마 두바레스 다티 요마레스 투사데 가와토와레 랑게 친니 두바 나위차라 마두비 세마지 요마레 메고 요스 랑게 친니 두바 코라 미도아스 로와 랑게 진다 랑게 친니 두바 코라 파 메와인자 코라 마두비 세마세지 가요레스 티메자 세마데기 니되게더니 수숨세지 요마레 로다 두신다 세가디 두슨 되용도스
If you accept autonomous syllogisms, then you must accept that both parties agree that there are valid cognitions that are valid in regard to intrinsic character. It is therefore necessary to prove the probandum by having both parties establish the three criteria with those non-mistaken valid cognitions. But since such valid cognitions do not exist, the subject and the other parties of the autonomous syllogism cannot be established. Sorry, the subject and the other parts of the autonomous syllogism cannot be established. So the subject, the probandum, the reason, etc. Okay. So this is the way of accepting an autonomous syllogism is like this, right? It creates these flaws if you accept an autonomous syllogism, but that the subject is not established, the reason is not established by valid cognition. What it means again is that there's, right, for an autonomous syllogism, is that there's this a non-mistaken valid cognition that is non-mistaken with regard to the subject and all the parts of the syllogism being established with intrinsic character. For both the challenger and the defender have such a non-mistaken valid cognition. And then within the non-mistaken valid cognitions that are not mistaken with respect to the objects being established by way of intrinsic character, and there's the commonly appearing subject. And then they both have valid cognitions that establish the three criteria of a reason that are also established by way of their intrinsic character. So that's what it means for an autonomous syllogism. And what are the three criteria of a reason again? The property of the subject, forward pervasion, and reverse pervasion. So the property of the subject, just to kind of make a very shorthand, simplified explanation of what those three criteria are. Property of the subject is that the reason, so these are the three criteria for the reason, right, in the syllogism. So the three parts of a syllogism, again, are the subject, predicate, reason. Okay, so the reason in a syllogism is that the property of the subject means that the reason is established within the subject. Okay, the reason is established with the aspect of a reason being established within the subject, property of the subject. the aspect of a reason that it is only existent in the predicate. Okay, only existent within the predicate, and that it is the only established within the predicate is the forward pervasion, and then the reverse pervasion is that the aspect of a reason that it is not existent within, it is only non-existent within the, sorry, it is entirely non-existent within the what's called the disconcordant class. Okay, the disconcordant class means the opposite of the predicate. So it's entirely not existent within the opposite of the predicate. Right. It is existent only in the it is existent only in the predicate. So anyway, these are some logic. Yeah, it's logic. So you have to really learn the topic a bit, or sort of we're just breezing through it very quickly. But anyway, hopefully that made some sense. Okay, so those three, right, criteria for a reason, right, for an autonomous syllogism, they have to be established by valid cognitions that are non-mistaken with respect to them appearing as though they are established by way of their own character. Now, there is no such valid cognition. It doesn't exist. So therefore, there can be no valid cognition that establishes the three criteria for a reason in such a way. There can be no valid cognition that establishes the subject in such a way, or the thesis to be proven, the probandum. So because there are no such valid cognitions. And so in essence, and so to summarize what's being said, is that because there are no valid cognitions that are unmistaken with respect to the appearance of objects being established by way of their own character. So because of that, there does not exist any object found by such a valid cognition. And this all comes down to, so this is why, again, we have the flaw of the subject not being established, the flaw of the reason not being established. And this all comes down to the fact that there is no intrinsic character. The intrinsic character itself does not exist of any object.
Oh yeah. Rangyu ke milena parubi ngubuma rangla tsema tendaba duba chogi rangla tsema di duba mugoyoso sta rangyu ke milen barda milenbe kansage ondu chewaina ani chojende ani tende bena kesi nguma wala kubi tenzi jimbaina nguma wadigi rangi tsinin dubi tsema la majuba kelangba tsamgi digires modo jige rangi tsinin dubi tsema jigi rangi tsinin duba la majubi tseme dub sewaji go mares tseme dubadi koe kele marwa nguma werwa bena ngago uma bashini chigo nguma wala taji koyondi ko sagi dini 치고 ngwe ranganila 아니 세메 룹 세디 코랑기 켈랑비 딘다 루디 시야체바이나 아니 가르레 랑게 신이 두바 나메찰라 마추비 세메 두바 켈랑바디 디고리 이네 세마디 룹 세디 디고 마라딘데 세마코로 요마라 세마디 두바 켈랑바디 디고리 추진디르와 수숨디 니기네 랑게 신이 두바라 마추비 세마디기 아니 두바레 소데 켈랑바tam기 디기레스 마도지기 틴데웨람 랑게 신인도 발라 마주비 쳔메 두바지 고마레스 틴도 쳔마코라 요마로 인도자니 코이 쳔마디게 두바 켈링고 어데 켈랑바 다가랑게 추진디 띵도 티니 가자디 까네 띵지 고로와 로와 두자 두는데 오마도지기 틴데웨 쳔메 두바지 고마레스 도 랑라 쳔마디 두바 미고소 세도 안도자니 라니기 쳔메 두바 켈랑바게 추진디 디기레스 이네 추진디 라니 틴데 코랑게 되바다게 세마디게 두바지 고마레스 코랑게 되바다게 세메 두비 추진지 요마레 코랑게 되바다게 세마디 시마 두바레스 코랑 되바다게 응어마 코랑게 되바다게 세마디 가리르스나 랑게 친니 두비 차라 rangi tsinyu dhruva nangwe chala ma dhruvi tsema ji shawari. Iza rangi tsinyu dhruva nangwe chala ma dhruvi tseme dhruvi chojenji ke langbi tengne tenzi goba di tegwa re. Rangyu ke milimbe kansaki rula. Rangyu ke limbe rula, ane rangi tsinyu dhruva nangwe chala ma dhruvi tseme dhruvi chojenji shawangwa re. Ti yo ma res. Indusini ti tsani rangyu ki tenzi ke nabala, ane tenzi tila chojen shima dhruva tenzi ma dhruvi kyundi yo res. rangyu ke milimbi chola tsema digi korangwe mo korangi dubatagi rangi tindiwi tsema digi dubaji shagi mares. Tsema digi ke langba digi tingni shaang ures. Nduzani parubi ke langla trini kubi tinzik layandu ani shendagi tinzik se oda tindijik tiri. Oda ti chani dini kasna tinzik shim matubi gyundi rangyu ke milimbi chola gyundi yomare, rangyu ke limbi chola gyundi yore. So oda kebadi dunisin tuyongudus.
Next page. If you do not accept autonomous syllogisms, then you may allow the essentialist to use that kind of valid cognition to establish the subject, etc. But you yourself do not need to establish the subject, etc. with those valid cognitions. Therefore, the arguments found in text, so sorry, I guess I didn't read that sentence. So if there's a person who does not accept autonomous syllogisms, then say they're in a debate, so that would be the Madhyamaka, say they're in a debate with an essentialist. Now, it's okay for the essentialist to accept for himself, right, in the perspective of the essentialist or for the essentialist, then he believes he or she believes that the subject, for instance, the subject, right, is established by a non-mistaken valid cognition and such that, right, it's a non-mistaken valid cognition that is non-mistaken with respect to the appearance of the object being established by way of intrinsic character. That's okay. That's enough for the essentialist defender to accept that. It doesn't actually have to be established by a valid cognition in such a way. The subject, because, well, there are no objects established by such valid cognitions. They don't exist. So it doesn't actually need to be, so in other words, the subject doesn't need to be established by valid cognition, okay? It's enough just to be accepted, just to be believed in other words. To be accepted here means to be believed in, okay? And again, this is to restate the kind of valid cognitions that are accepted or believed in by essentialists are ones which are non-mistaken with respect to the appearance of intrinsic character, non-mistaken with respect to intrinsic character. And so you don't need such a valid cognition to establish, for someone who doesn't accept autonomous syllogisms, you don't need such a valid cognition to establish the subject. The subject can just be accepted to be that way by the essentialist. So this is so the slight distinction here is that we're saying that for a syllogism which is based on what the other party accepts, it's fine and it's enough for the defender to to kind of move forward in the syllogism or in the argument and to use the syllogism just from within within the basis of the other party accepting or believing that there is a subject established by a valid cognition that is non-mistaken with respect to the subject appearing as though it is established by way of an intrinsic character. Such a subject does not actually need to be established by a valid cognition that is non-mistaken with respect to the appearance of intrinsic character. appearing as though it's established by way of intrinsic character. So it can just be accepted. It doesn't have to actually be established by such a valid cognition. Okay, so again, simply because there does not exist such a subject that is established by such valid cognitions. That doesn't exist. So it can't be established by it. And this is why the point being made. This is why these flaws apply only to those who accept or believe, who posit and accept autonomous syllogisms. It does not apply to those who do not accept the autonomous syllogisms.
야, 다 드린다 딘데지 잠시하긴스. 아니 진짜 디 낭도 조딘다 디가서 다 개버니 랑주기 딘지 켈림비 초라 아니 디가스나 추진다 딘지 마주기 균 요술 랑주 딘지 케말림비 신다 딘지 켈림주 초라 딘지 균디 메수디 투사디 랑기 친유 주비 추진라 체마 송 세기 체마 송어디 랑기 친유 주비 추진라 아니 체마 송 세엄 랑게 친이 두바 나위ቻ라 마투비 치미니 된지 켈렘베 땡네 아니 딘데위 쳬바디 랭우도 두스는다 디 두스니다 로는데 딘데지 돈네데 마 쳬바디 로네 두스니 스나 랭그레스 다진 잠샤긴 지와틀레나 보수로치스
So we'll stop the explanation for today there, and then to summarize once again, the main point that's being discussed is to make this distinction between those who accept autonomous syllogisms and those who do not accept autonomous syllogisms, showing and seeing that only these flaws of the subject not being established and the reason not being established, that only applies for those who accept autonomous syllogisms. And then what are the autonomous syllogisms? Well, again, that's where there's the parties in the debate, right, have so we can talk about it from the perspective of the subject, the parts of the syllogism. So the subject of the syllogism is in an autonomous syllogism, there is a subject that is established by way of intrinsic character, and that subject is, something that is true in a valid cognition, something that is, valid within some valid cognition. Another way you could say it is that it's an autonomous syllogism is where the valid cognitions that establish the subject, etc., the parts of the syllogism, establish them to as being correct, non-mistaken, with respect to the appearance of being established by way of intrinsic character. Okay, so that's what's meant by autonomous syllogism. So if you get some understanding of that, then you're understanding this this section, the meaning here. Okay, so now we can stop the explanation and take questions if there are some. And maybe Janet has a hand up if you want to ask the question.
Yeah, so if I followed everything properly, it sounds to me like when you are talking about it's enough to believe, when you just say it's enough to believe this, does that boil down to until we have a direct perception of emptiness, until we still we can see emptiness directly, we're basically relying on the faith in the teachers that we are subscribing to. Because it seems to me if it were truly pure logic, that one of these two views would, somebody would be able to really convince the other. It wouldn't be this debate. So until we get that valid cognition ourselves, are we really operating on faith? And then it's our job to pursue meditation and hopefully achieve that valid cognition ourselves.
I don't understand you said if it were truly logic, then someone should be able to convince the other and that there wouldn't be a debate. I don't understand why that wouldn't be a debate.
Well, I mean, at some point you would think like these two views go back and forth a lot. And it seems to me like you said at one point that it's enough to just believe it at this point.
Do you recall what it was? Oh, I'll just ask the question. But just to clarify for everyone else who's listening, just to clarify what was said is that it's so the point. Well, I'll just ask Geshe and he'll
no, make sure if I wasn't clear, then it's going to be hard for you to ask a clear question. So
no, you were clear. Just to clarify that the thing that's enough to accept is that it's enough for a reason to function. In other words, it's enough for a syllogism to actually prove to a defender, right? We have two people, a challenger and a defender. If the defender simply believes that there is a subject like the eyes, like whatever subject you posit, the eyes, if they believe the eyes are established by a valid cognition that is non-mistaken with respect to the aspect of appearing, the aspect of appearing as though truly established, right? Established by intrinsic character. Then you can still prove something to them about it, even if they don't actually have a valid cognition that establishes that, because such valid cognitions don't exist. So that I just want to make that point. We're not just to clarify from the outset. No one ever said, Tsongkhapa didn't say, Geshe didn't say, I didn't say, and Chandrakirti didn't say that you can just accept, whatever you. Well, no, that is true. But it has to be. Yeah, I'll ask Geshe because you're right. Because the reason of the that's the reasons that we're using the syllogisms we're using are the syllogisms based on what the other party accepts. So you're right. So it is something where you both accept. But I'll just ask Geshe because I think the point isn't that you don't have to actually establish things with reason. That's not the point being made. But I'll just see what he said. Again.
Maybe I should just rephrase it to then, is it really that we're operating on faith until we
I see what you
get
mean.
a valid cognition, and until then we're relying on the faith of one of these teachers, either Chandrakirti or Baba Viveka.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. Again, Dani kasi ya ta pena shindaki tensi kapsu ani ngango la the chushin da ngango kelemba mase chigo la kelemba la yashi kelemba yinzang ani ta ngazo tongni gi ta tongba ningo sungo tobe lo rangi la makebe pardu makebe ngon la ta ngazo chi yiche gi wangi chi yiche glamne drogo rebes chiganzo chi cheming me chang kelemba zang yinzang teni ngazo chi pena loben dawa drapa so lama loben dawa drapa gi ta dawa konzo jeshi dan sigla the yiche chene drogo rebe drogo dang ra so gyula ngunsu tobe nutong ngunsu tobe yon make partu ani riba ngone kinsen riba karasa riba ngone yorebes yamana iche tsam rebes oti
다든다 디가도라 세 가지 가르고 있으면 딘지 인지 민지 고고 말해 로다 딘지 고고 왕도 챤나 딘지 고세 고와디 당 고겐이기 딘지 따디 켈랑 받은 게 되게스 되게 지시고 와 딘지 다디 베나 우마 방하고치 안치고뭐 샤면도 다 벤다든다 돌아 되는 거 다들인데 마서 미쳐진 된다 마셔라 미다데 랑라 미다 위치를 아니 베나 품바 신은 딘지 신다게 딘지 거를 와 딘다디 자와시라고 치기를 와다 준다 딘나신신으로 와 셰라 베나 딘데 왜 따디 딘지 고사고 고와디기 켈렘바스 깨지디 시골 다디 딘지 네버도 고고 안도 좋은 말이 딘지 된다 저런 이제 제봤음 그 도어를 인지 지고 말했을 때 이제 그 당부 내 장이 디 이제 그 때문에 대점기 침해요 말했다 디 인비 레 말했으로 랑싱으로 돈이 세대다 랑싱 그 주바레도 레메도로 다 랑싱 마주비 주세 가리도 티 삼로 먹보지 땅이 다 슝라 퇴바체 슝네마 송아 낭싱의 균생도 다다 레도 레면도 어디 균생 삼매들라 아니 지도라라 소파 지방아 아스니 지방아 송여 지방아 되게 삼모당해시 그러와 근데 추기 담에 주비 지방아 강사게 담에 주비 지바 듄스 타둥 지바 아스니다 우마 주바나라던데 쪼디 빠는다 와서 비시 되자고 다 디르바 디기 따지 제네로와 아니 랑싱게 마주비 균센데 아니 네바 템부 네 스웨디 룽조 메바치 이제 조 메바치 리비 다디 인사레스 가스나 랑싱게 두나 쿄엔디네디도 랑시 마주바 초라 디디디 두스 오다디 네바 네디 리바디기 섬무다인데 다 디지디 다 리바딩아 조 고마스디 다 슝라 베자라 tö섬진디 신이다 슝망보 롭조 마제나 균센도 다데 균세 찍마도 지기 요 말에 로아 한수 삼모 땅에 균세 rak바지모도 다 슝나라 랑싱 마주비 균세 베나 동관이들 니여레 추게 담에다 강사 담에스 강사게 된게 돈이당 강사라 신비 풍부이 된게 돈이스 다 강사라 신비 풍부이 된게 돈이 줍지가 리바데라 지드르라 소거지 봉아 송여레 로아타 로아치 드르라 딘지 도지스다 딘지 봉아 요르다 저런데 호디제 아니 강사게 된 도드니 랑싱 마주비 돈이 때라 뵙제들라 아니 강사디 아니 타든도 주문도 랑게 다싱 알아 때는 아니 랑게 다시 된도로와 아니 한 타든을 리바세 로가지여레 오다 딘조 리바데더니 담을 셰워 다 줍지게 리바된 것도 하고 그래 줍지게 리바데 하면은 줍지게 리바게 땅사기 동반이기 고안이에 그래요 말. 다 계속 리바데 삼는 땅만은 다 이제 진대래다. 아니 이제 들었더니 니마지 균세 로바지 꼬연데 이제 돼 라도지. 대지도 이제 들라 아주 아니 이제 코로나 샹나 지고 말다. 이제 들었다 쳔매 잡된 두문도스. 다 쳔매 잡된 삼는 땅인데 되니 네바 때문에 치도 다 균세 망부 삼고야 되니레스. 인도산에 다 배전나라 동반이 세드 dü나 니나리 강사게 된게 돈이다 강사라 심이 풍부된 게 돈이스 그래서 강사게 돈이 주에더라 다둥을 봐 삼모 땅이 다둥을 봐 셰고래 그러와 아니 강사라 심이 풍부된 게 돈이기 들이 봐 돈이디 아니 쳔매 네바 때문이야라 아니 지두라라 소바리 뭔가게 삼모 땅고래 인도 지두라라 소바리 뭔가디 가리래 어디 뒤 삼모 땅에 지도더니 슝라 루종 제균은 디레스 인도산에 이제신의 줘야 말했습니다. 케넨세디 나고도 직원이 바로 올라 깨지시고래스. 나고디기 치고라 다 고인데 아니 치고기 되반나 신기 테마디 두바지고 말해. 치고디기 켈랑 가지나 되니 티딘도 되니 준생 고예요레스. 케넨세디 다디 켈레바. 어디게 지시고래. 모두 지금 가라 말했스. 로디 로아디 나고 치고 유비 온도 진다 딘지지 고바이나 아니 켈레바 스케지 레와레 신라 딘지라. 어디라
is clarifying. So here, this whole explanation has been in the context of when you're in the situation of having to provide a reason to somebody. In order to analyze, meditate, to realize emptiness, you don't actually need to provide a reason to someone. I mean, to actually have a two-party debate where someone is providing a reason to another person. That's not absolutely necessary. So this is all in the context of where that's happening, when you actually have two human beings having a discussion, right? A person has to posit a reason to another person to help them get something to click and to realize something. Okay, so in that context, right, that's where this phrasing of merely, accepting something is enough. Just that, again, meaning that for the reason to be accepted by the defender, that's adequate for them to, again, use it for it to function, meaning to move to a deeper understanding or a new kind of realization of something. It's enough to accept the reason. They don't have to actually have it established with genuine, valid knowledge. Okay, that's the context of two people having this kind of debate where someone has to posit a reason. But in general, that's not absolutely necessary. So in general, the way we proceed with our understanding and reflection and analysis is not just through faith, because we have to actually understand when we're trying to establish emptiness, right? We see, okay, well, is emptiness established with a nature or not established with a nature? Okay, how do we know? What we have to analyze? We have to use reasons to analyze that. And so we have to depend on studying a lot of the treatises and see what's in these texts, because they provide different styles of reasoning or different ways of reasoning about these deep questions about do things have natures or not, things like that. So what are the things in the text? Well, they provide reasons such as the 5 types of reasons that establish the uh, selflessness of phenomena, right? That includes the reasoning of freedom from one and many, etc. There are 5 main ones in the text. Then the reasons that establish and prove the selflessness of persons. So there's especially in Chandakirti's Entering the Middle Way, the 7-fold analysis of a person, and so that's it's something that we can't just go based on what the texts say or the masters say and just have faith in that. Okay, we have to actually look and see and think of, okay, if things are established from their own side with a nature, what would be the flaws? Why can't they be established within nature? And you have to develop a genuine ascertaining knowledge, like a definitive knowledge of those reasons. So this is why it's so important to study a lot, of the texts. If we don't, then our analysis will remain very coarse, we'll just have kind of like a surface level of analysis without really learning more of the reasoning provided in the texts. And so there's different reasons for proving selflessness of phenomena and proving the emptiness of persons, selflessness of persons. Again, what is the difference? Selflessness of phenomena is just the emptiness within phenomena. Selflessness of persons is the emptiness within people, living beings. So the 7-fold analysis, for instance, looking at whether the person exists within the basis of designation or not, etc. And then the ways of these proofs, right? These proofs that establish emptiness, they have to be understood. If you don't really investigate and analyze with analytical meditation, then you won't understand them. So you could have faith, but then you might, if you leave it just at having faith, then as soon as you hear some other view or something else that seems convincing, then you'll just lose your faith in the view of emptiness, right? It won't last. It won't take you to the direct perception of emptiness you're talking about. So that faith won't remain. So that's everything Geshe said.
Thank you very much.
Does I don't know if they can hear me.
Yeah, you see.
Okay. Does a syllogism truly exist if there is no inherent character or person and ultimate existence and with a valid cognition, or does just a belief in an intrinsic person and character create a autonomous syllogism?
Okay. Denzi, so what are you trying to say when you say really exist?
Like, I say,
Like you're trying to say like ultimately exist and as in the way that is the refutation, I mean the object being refuted by Chandakirti or something else?
yeah, I would say the way that like ultimately exists in the sense of being refuted by, sorry, I can't pronounce his name, but yeah.
Okay, so Tenzing Dezo Demba Drupa Rebes Karisa. Tenzing Demba Drupa Rebe Yamana Ganzak Dong the Kalsang Dongche, there's a Kelen Begone, and Rangi Gitansi, Perisavreda, Drugirebes, Dumber Druberebes, Samana Kalsang Dongche, Kelen Begone Druberebes, Rangi Gitansi.
덴바 주었을 때 그래서 덴바도 준바세 덴바들에 가리.
The Ray that Ngone Druberebes, that
알레
Dumber
문제
Druberebes,
알레
the Dumber
디레.
Druberebes, the catch this.
그래 다 균세 덴지라 때네 된다지 하고 거이나 덴지기 덴이 캐시디 직로라샤 두거리 디딘도 두베기 된다데 하고 가리디로 아니 디 두제기 균세스는 숨레고다 캐시디 직 하고 거리 아니 디딘도 두베기 텔라 바베기 된다데레 디 된다데 두바 지겐기 균세인데 다 디지도 캐시디 캐랑바 좀 아니 디 덴지 양다 작업 말 딘지디 다 딘지디 세메 주비 땡네 아니 디 된디 딘지딘도 유메 섬로 당사디 레고 아니 디 균센데라디니 신이 딘지 다고여저와 인도서는 다 균센데라 때네 세메 주비 키시기 띵도 된디 주바 제발나더니 딘지 양다 차여를 덴바디 차여요 다 디마이 바체 케랑바 점기 추징이 띵도 아니 줍자지 줍주 추지 줍베기 균센지 거 와이나 디 안 대발 자기 말했어. 가서 놓고 양고 로라 디 가서 키시고라 야보지 로라 세메 예바 디메디 아니 고양 제라 키시고라 바 로도지. 된다디 봐서 못다 봐시니 키시 추진고랑 드니 양뭐 신다강라 드니 튼지 삼무 당고디 아니 다긴이라 샤야기 튼지디당 제수 샤야기 추진이 삼무 주어주디 아니 줍지 최디 주베기 딘지디디니 대바차 민지 메바체고 버렸어. 이주전에 다 딘지 덴바세드다 저랑 딘지 양다고였어야 시고르와 딘지 양다고였어야라 이지미지 강 때라 밥사기 계시디 세메 주바지 고고레스 세메기로와 켈레바 좀 많이 바지 세메 주비 땡네 로와 수수기다 디 세메 주비 추진기 땡도 아니 균세 양다기 땡네 안 된디 되니 주바체바이나 수수 섬무 땅나요 예바 때문에 땡이 신기 주고주기 균세네요 균생 다다지 대시 세부 자투사지 자고레스 팀에는 계시디 아니 진짜 양 신자게 딘스라 드니 추진 케랑 받으면 그리스디 두다 공옥이 계시고 두다 공옥이 두다 민자와 니기 통네 아니 딘스 고연디 아니 두다 디 딘스 고사기 두다 디고고 두다 심바디기 케랑 받으면 세메 두바스디 세메 두도 투나오지요 말와 어디인상 디 두다 민자와 니기 통네 아니 딘스 고연디 아니 추진디 케랑 받으면 띵도더니 뭐 두보레 쓰디 디 디니 가스나 세메르도 투나 메고도 신이 시와리 근데 디 세메르도 투나 온도 제와이나 키시 세메르도 바지 마루나 딘지 되게 줍주쳐도 줍통 말이었어 디 딘지 한다 책 말이었어 어딘데지라다
So it sounds like what you're asking about is really, for a reason to be are there, what makes a reason really flawless, correct reason, right? Are there really correct, flawless reasons? So there's the three different parts of a syllogism, right? There's, again, the basis for the syllogism, that's the subject. Then within that, what's the thing being decided? The thing being, right, figured out, understood about it, that's the predicate. And then there's the reason to prove it, proof or reason. So that does, have to be something like the subject there, the thing, the basis of your syllogism, the thing that's, that has a quality that you're trying to prove. Basis is the subject, right? That should be something established. That you start your debate, your syllogism on the basis of something established with valid knowledge, or valid cognition. Something that, that's how it can be, and also with the reason that should be established by a valid cognition. Just merely believing in a subject or a reason is not really enough to have a flawless reason. Okay, a flawless reason won't be that. You need to have the basis of your debate, the basis of, the thing that you are understanding, the qualities of the subject has to be known validly. So the reason for that is because if you don't actually, know what the subject is with a true knowledge, a genuine knowledge, a valid knowledge, then, you have this, it appears to be something in your mind at one point earlier, when you're thinking of it, but then later it'll shift and you'll think of it in a different way. The way it appears in your mind is going to be unclear, right? If you don't have a sort of stable knowledge of what it is. So when we talked about, and again, this is when we're talking about a flawless reason being posited, it's then there should be something that with valid cognitions. When we were talking about the subject and other parts of a syllogism, just being accepted and that being adequate, being enough to just believe it or be accepted. That's in the context, again, of a debate where not only is there two parties, but there's two parties from different paradigms, right? Two people who have a different philosophical paradigm from each other. So within that context, then you can't find, right, the sort of common ground that Bhava-Viveka insists on, this commonly appearing subject. It just isn't there because the people are in two completely different paradigms. So in that context, then it's enough for the defender to just accept the subject. But because there is not going to be, some commonly established subject that is established by valid knowledge for both parties, because their basic kind of way of understanding the world is so different. They're in these different paradigms, right? Okay. Does that answer? Yeah.
Thank you.
That's 잠시만요. that is awesome.
So now the time is finished, so we'll stop there.
Chere Sewang Tenzin Jazo Yin Shabe Sidi Pat Tenjuro Ji Kadin Duji Kamsu Chile Ju Topju Dabu Lundo Ge Lose Namla Rilamang Demin De Lamdun Gibi She Sowan De Changju Simju Rimbo Che Maje Panam Ge Juro Ji Kewa nyamba meba yang kone kondo pewa sho tajin negu sebe meji samo tende tadang tawe de pajo lujubu yapse gongba chishin kondo chebe gyoro ngo kewa di kewo gu Sönama yişi çozo şin, sönama yişi lechun, tamba kuni tobara. Thank you, Tujiche. Good night, all of you.
Sunjanagila. Sunjanagu.
Right.